vibe.
What's up? Another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Randes, also known as Ricky Randes, and a great episode for you today. Today is honestly one of my favorite conversations I've had in a while. I have returning guest and dear friend Joe Rupe from Fringe.fm, which is a app you can find on Androids or Apple, or you can go to Fringe.fm on a desktop or web browser, and you can listen to really interesting shows on a independent radio station. And he runs it, he created it, he picks which shows are on there. He has his own show called Lighting the Void, which I highly recommend you guys checking out. Some of you might know, but the Ripple Effect Podcast is on Fringe.fm every Wednesday. And if you go on Fringe.fm, you will be able to see all the shows that are on Fringe.fm, and you'll be able to see what time they're on. So definitely check that out. This was a super fun and interesting conversation, so I'll try to make this intro short. But of course, I have to remind you, this is a value for value show. So if you get some value out of these conversations, consider giving some value back. And that doesn't necessarily mean financially. If you can support the show financially, that's great. There's plenty of ways of doing it. We have a PayPal account. We have a Patreon page. We have merch. You can go to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com or go to the rippleeffectpodcast.com to find links to all the ways you can support the show. But if you can't support the show financially, don't worry about it. Share the show, review the show, tell people about the show, and that goes a long way. Also, as some of you guys know, my YouTube channel got banned, deleted. So I do have a new YouTube channel that I'm uploading just clips. But if you guys want to see where you can find the full video episodes, they're always going to be available on my website, but they're also available on a bunch of different other places. Go to my website, rippleeffectpodcast.com, click on channels, and you'll be able to find links to all the places you can find the full video episodes. Last but not least, I have a new Telegram group chat. I'll put links in the show description for the group chat. I don't believe the link is on my website yet, but I'm pretty sure you could search it too on Telegram. If you're on Telegram, join the Ripple Effect Podcast group chat. It's a place for the listeners and myself to connect, share our thoughts about what's going on in the world, past episodes, new episodes, share articles, share anything that you find interesting. And I know many of you guys feel like you're on an island surrounded by people who think you're crazy. So join the group chat and connect with people that are like-minded. And I think that's it. Enjoy the show. Actually, one last thing. People who are ordering merch, that we actually just sent out a shipment recently. The merch does take a little bit of time sometimes, counting on what you order and when you order it, because some products are on back order, so they're taking a little longer. But typically within like 2 weeks, the stuff's shipped out. And the reason I'm telling you this is because if you are waiting 2 or 3 weeks, I don't want you to think that you're not getting your stuff. You should be getting it soon. And if by any chance you don't get it soon, then hit me up and I'll get an update for you. That's it, guys. Enjoy the show, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.
What's up, brother?
How are you, bud?
Let me make sure you're not getting feedback real quick. No, you're not.
Sounds good.
Am I coming in too hot?
Well, I can adjust it. It sounds pretty good. I can always put it down a tad.
All right, cool.
What do you use for recording software?
I just use a voice meter potato, basically. I mean, you could do pretty much everything you can do with an advanced mixer with it, and it's only like $20. You know?
So it's a virtual mixer?
Yeah. I mean, you have EQ, several inputs, several outputs, compression, limiter gates, reverb, master. You can do everything with it. You know, it's meant for live streaming, pretty much.
Oh, nice. I know I've looked at like virtual chords because my setup, for some reason, I couldn't figure out a way to get Well, actually, you know what? I think I have tried it with Zoom. I know with Skype I couldn't do it, and I think I had the same problem with Zoom where I couldn't figure out how to get my Pro Tool software to directly read my Zoom call. For some reason, the audio just wouldn't come up, and I couldn't figure out which input. I couldn't figure out anything on how to make it work. So I
Yeah.
just manually do it. I use a little. I don't even know if they sell them anymore because I've had it for such a long time. But it's this thing called like a M box, and it's just an interface where you plug it in to your USB into your computer, and it has inputs and outputs and headphone jacks and all that stuff. It's this little thing, and then I have a studio mixer that I use for this microphone, and then if I have anybody in studio, it goes directly into my interface. And but yeah, so what I do is I use my speaker output from my computer to go back into my interface and
Yeah.
to get it into Pro Tools, because this interface was designed, it's like it was a package thing where it came with the Pro Tools and it works together. But I know Midnight Mike once told me, he's like, no, you can use like a virtual cable to do that. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I attempted to, and I was too dumb to figure out how to do it. But I know there's probably a much easier way. And I know some people do that. They just use the virtual mixer. When you're doing everything on your computer, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have, analog action.
Right. Well, there's pros and cons. I do everything on the computer, but if the computer freezes up, then I'm done. I'm done for, right? So I have a hardware encoder, a Telos encoder. I just don't use it. Like, so if I was to really rewire this thing the way I wanted to do it, I would put everything into the hardware and then just use my computers for, whatever. But I'm lazy. I haven't figured out how to wire it all yet. So because if something fails, the hardware encoder won't. So
Well, I know.
I'm trying to do everything old like Art Bell style.
Yeah, yeah. I know some people. I mean, they always record a backup too. I know Richard Grove forever was. I remember once I think one time he was on one of the appearances on my show. I had some issue where this has happened to me. I mean, luckily just a handful of times. So I'm up to like 300 and I don't know what it is, 50 or 60 something episodes, and only like a handful of times I will log out of Pro Tools. I know I saved it, and when I go back to edit it, it's gone, and I don't know where the file is. And
Yeah.
and I remember once I'm like, Richard, I'm like, instead of me looking for it, I'm like, by any chance did you record our conversation? He's like, I did. He's like, you don't do a backup. So I know a lot of people talk about how, it's like, why you don't use a backup. Well, back before, I now, like, Zoom has completely taken over, where like the majority of interviews and podcasts are done over Zoom. But back in the day, well, when I started 2013, like, Skype was actually more commonly used for a long period of time until almost recently. And I would have to use a third party to record my Skype calls, the video, and then you can also get the audio. So I would use the Skype audio as a backup, but it was never great quality. It was always kind of shitty quality.
Yeah, Skype will always adjust no matter what you do to the settings. It'll always adjust on its own and stuff. But there's technologies now. Like, we're in a day and age where anybody, and I mean anybody, has the opportunity to do a broadcast radio show on any level, right? I mean, with the technology that they have, with the SIP links they have now, and all the software they have, and even these bigger companies are trying to sell virtual boards for higher prices when there's open source virtual boards. So it's kind of a losing game for old school radio, because it's just like Art Bell said, man, this is a new genre. You can take your show as big as you want it. Everybody has the tools to do that now.
Yeah, I mean, you see it now with we talked about on the last Union Don't Want It, Joe Rogan and the Dr. Sanjay Gupta interview. And I mean, just think about like podcasts, like the power of podcasts at the moment, where something that people were just I mean, Rogan, I was listening to him like right in the beginning, and he was kind of what sparked my interest in a podcast, because I loved like just a organic conversation. And it kind of was what I liked about radio, but without the commercials. So it's like, oh, this is great, because it's like, well, especially I remember when WEI, which is like a local sports radio station in Massachusetts, I remember some years ago, they really blew up, and people are like, oh, fuck music. Like, I'd rather listen to these guys talk. It's more entertaining.
Yeah.
It's more thought provoking. And you know, I could kind of see, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, people are almost at the point where like they're sick of hearing music and they enjoy the more thought-provoking conversation. And the good thing about conversation, it makes the time go by much faster than music does, where like, you know, on average 3 4, a long song might be 5 minutes, but you have to listen to a lot of songs to make an hour go by. I mean, an hour can fly by if you're listening to a conversation. I mean, even if you're having a
Yeah.
conversation, that I mean, sometimes people are like, well, how do you talk to somebody for an hour, 2 hours, or whatever? And I'm just like, it's easy. I'm like, if I'm at the gym, sometimes I get in a conversation, I'm like, oh shit, it's like 30 minutes later, or I'm at the bar.
Yeah.
You know, one of the everybody's had those nights with their friends where you're having some whiskey or whatever, and you're bullshitting, and next thing you know, it's like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and time flies by with conversation. So it's really not much different. Only I'm trying to capture that and record it and archive it, and which is interesting because as we change and as we our ideas and perspectives kind of evolve and change, you're kind of archiving all that. And even for, you know, being a father and having 2 kids, thinking about like the potential of them going back and listening to their father before they had kids,
Yeah.
in the process
Yeah.
of having, I mean, I couldn't even imagine listening to my dad as like in his 20s, like just listening to his opinions and perspectives and like who he was before kids and what he thought about fatherhood and all that stuff. It's really intriguing. I had Alex from Skeptico on not too long ago, which was a fun. Actually, I've been getting a lot of mixed reviews on that.
I like Alex.
You like
Yeah.
Alex? Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. He pushes back, and we disagreed a lot on quite a few things. I think the last it was like a 2 hour show, and the last hour was just us debating some things. But I definitely think that he might have a little. It's weird. I'm like confused with him because I'm like, you're a David Icke fan, and you accept the fact that he's, you know, was well known previously as reptilian guy. That didn't turn you off, and now you are going balls to the wall against flat earthers and Tom Cowan, who was just on my show not too long ago. And I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Cowan, but
Yeah.
yeah, and he just
Yeah.
like, Tom Cowan's bullshit. And he's like losing his fucking mind, and he's trying to like convert me. You know, he's like, you tell me what's the percentage that you think the flat Earth could be, you know, serious. He's like, it's bull, you know, and I'm like, I think there's a couple flaws in his thinking a little bit because he's picking and choosing and cherry picking what things to believe and what things are too absurd to believe. And to me, like, I'm one of those people, I'm like, I don't think anything's too absurd to believe. Like, he believes in spirituality. He dives deep into the, you know, near death experiences, which, you know, he was on the Union of the Unwanted. We went to the episode of that on that. And you know, so he's into all these things that are kind of like considered supernatural or maybe unexplained or maybe not accepted by mainstream scientists. But and then Tom Cowan, Dr. Tom Cowan, he's like, his theories are all fucking ridiculous. And then, you know, and
You know what, I think that happens because that breaks people's paradigm, because I'm a spiritual person too, right? Like, all I talk about is magic. I think metaphysics, psychology, like, I think it's the ultimate solution to everything, all of our problems, right? But I, when I think about the flat earth, when I think about things like that, it breaks up your paradigm. So there is this kind of I think thing that happens in this community where people are, you know, they want to believe in certain things but not other things, because it's okay. It's just like some people say, well, it's okay to practice astral travel and do the out of body stuff, but I won't do tarot, magic, divination, or manifesting rituals or anything like that. And in my mind, it's like, why? Right? Well, there's a paradigm background, and honestly, a lot of this stuff comes from, I hate to say it, but it's religion. And if you were brought up into this paradigm where you're constantly, there's this constant war between good and evil, good and evil, good and evil, good and evil, and you're brought up in a religious background, as you get older, I think you start to accept new things, but there's certain things that you won't allow to break up your paradigm. Even the world is round, right? Um, I have a problem with flat Earth, honestly. Like, I'm not sure I don't know, right? It's possible, but I don't. To me, to debate it at this is like it's not relevant. Although it would be a pretty big damn lie, you know. So,
Yeah, I'm not
like,
not against it either. I mean, I'm not for it or what was kind of the thing that it was a little frustrating was that he needed to hear that I was against it, that it was so ridiculous that, and I'm like, well, why can't I just not plant my flag anywhere? I'm like, that's not even just in regards to flat earth. That's kind of how I live my life. Like I'm constantly evolving. I'm constantly like I don't like to join any teams or any
sure.
ideologies. Doesn't mean I don't like them and I don't explore them. I do. I benefit from exploring many of them, but I just don't like using labels just because it can stunt my growth or stunt my ability to explore other possibilities. So to me, it's just wanting somebody to join. It's very similar to like Noam Chomsky, how everybody quotes manufacturing consent, and
Yeah.
he exposed a lot of people to Edward Bernays and the inner working of propaganda and how influential propaganda works to control the population and how the media uses it and all this stuff. But then you get to 9/11 and he's like, it's the most ridiculous thing ever. And it's like, for some reason, and you see this with like many people where, like you said, for some reason they draw a line somewhere. It's like, wait, I don't get it. Like if you believe, I had Dr. Robert Lustig on, who we had a great, like I think he was on for an hour and a half, whatever it was, and we had a
Yeah.
great conversation. I don't know if you know his work, but he's really famous for his it went viral. It was like this lecture called The Bitter Truth, and it was about sugar and how dangerous sugar is, and like the whole history of it, and how how the sugar industry and everybody was in cahoots together, and how how much it harms people, all this stuff. And then at the very end of the show, I don't know how the fuck we brought it up, but somebody brought, either myself or somebody said something about like the COVID vaccine, and I couldn't let it go. Like I'm just like I got to comment
Right.
on it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I'm like, really? Like you understand how just corrupt the whole system is in regards to food and medicine, but you think the vaccine, like department of big pharma, are the good guys? Like they're the ones, like they put all the moral people together and they're like, hey, you guys take care of the vaccines, the rest of us are going to try to just focus on making money. Like it's so fucking silly. And then we got in his little debate, and I'm just like thinking to myself, like, I mean, first of all, it's hilarious because I called it gene therapy, and he's like, no, it's a vaccine, it's not gene therapy. And now, like, literally, it's publicly accepted that it's a gene therapy. It's not really, a vaccine. But to me, I see it over and over. Jesse Ventura, perfect example, right? This guy, I've had Jesse on. I love Jesse. Dennis McKenna, another one. Scott Horton, actually, in the beginning of the pandemic, I had a conversation with him, which actually I had a lot of positive feedback because we did like a good hour and a half of like disagreeing on some things, but we had a very civil discussion. This was at the height of the pandemic when like nobody could find any two people who disagree having a civil discussion. So everybody's like, oh my God, two people who are, disagreeing on some things, but actually having a civil discussion. But it's weird because it's like you would assume like, okay, if you believe this, and this, then it shouldn't be too hard to believe that. And for some reason, certain people, like, they draw the line somewhere, or they have blinders,
Yeah.
and you don't ever know why. Like, it could be like they were molested by somebody who believed that.
Right. I do think it's really cliche, Ricky, but I think I think that there's a metaphysical war going on all the time, and I don't look at it as like a battle between good and evil. I look at it as this alpha and omega principle, okay, of love and fear, right? So people are base all of their decisions, if you break it down in psychology, they base everything they do on love, either trying to get more love or fear, right? So these people that are willing to talk about all this other stuff, they're very knowledgeable about, but most people will draw a line in the sand on where their fear, where they have the ultimate fear, right? So if it's like a flat earth, you tell somebody, well, the earth is, this whole thing is wrong. Well, that's a fear they can't handle, explain, or anything like that. Even if it's better to believe, honestly, that that's not real, And in their mind, there's a subconscious program telling them that there's no way that can be real, right? Versus the other person who's willing to explore it, who's not afraid of the earth being flat whatsoever. They're more concerned about going after the truth. But those people that are concerned about going after the truth are afraid of not having it, right? So a lot of people do everything based on their fears. And when we come to realize that, then we can come to actually grow as humans. Most of us are doing what? Like when I do this searching for like astral travel, magic, manifestation, I have a fear of not knowing what's on the other side. I want to know, you know. And so I think we justify things for different reasons, but it all comes down to that most of the time, you know.
Well, I think spirituality and religion do have a lot to do with flat Earth and some of the other topics, because I don't think it's coincidental that a lot of people who believe in flat Earth are spiritual people, or I'll take it even a step further, are religious people. And it kind of helps. So it always, I always wonder, and this is not just judging others. I mean, I do this with myself too. Like, okay, what came first? Was it something made sense and then that helped mold my perspective, or do I have a perspective that went out to look for things that made sense of my perspective, right? And so like I was always curious, like, okay, were these flat earthers really spiritual and really religious, and they believe that, like, okay, evolution's bullshit, or like one of those people that have all these issues with that and say no, there's a creator and there's a greater purpose and we're much more important than the world makes it out to be, which I agree with. And then the flat earth theory, just like, oh shit, it's connecting all the dots that I've been looking for. Or,
Yeah.
you know, in some cases, is it that flat earth that alone made sense to somebody, and then like, oh shit, well, if this makes sense, then wouldn't that also mean maybe there's something greater that we don't quite understand? So I'm always curious, like, on somebody's journey, you know, like, was it what came first? Because you talk to these flat earthers and it's like, okay, well, why? The question that always comes up too is like, well, why would they hide this? Why would they, you know, why would they keep such a secret? And it seems like constantly coming back to a lot of it, not to put words in people's mouth, but maybe, you know, you have an explanation on your theory on why. But if they did lie, like, it seems like a lot of the flat earthers think it's because they do want us to feel like we're not as important, like that we're just one planet going around the sun, you know, out of tons of planets and tons of universes, and the world doesn't revolve around us. But then if you look at the flat earth type of the perspective of the world, it's like, no, everything revolves around us and we're,
Yeah.
you know. So it's you know, which I like. I mean, I like that way of looking at things. I think we are unique, and we are, I mean, of course, if the universe is as big as they say, and there's, I mean, our understanding of the universe, or even reality or consciousness, is so limited based on our senses. I mean, I always try to remind myself, like, if I couldn't smell, if I couldn't see, if I couldn't hear, like if I had lost a couple of my senses, like my understanding of these things, like, it would be like magic. It would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? What's scent? Oh, scent is this thing that I'm like, what the fuck are you, like, if I didn't have a nose, like I'd be like, well, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Or you know, sound or whatever it may be, you know. So it's it's weird because it's so much of it's like, even when you do psychedelics, like, what do you think some of it is like going into another realm and tapping into something, kind of like, well,
I do.
like radio,
Yeah.
right? Like we are a antenna picking up frequencies, and does it help pick up? Is that a good metaphor to kind of, is that kind
Well,
of?
I think it is. I think in the end, like, there's two types of people, and then there's both, right? So there's the scientific point of view where it's like, I need to figure out the parallels of truths and then name them. And then there's philosophers, like the mindset that you have. That's like, well, let's just keep asking questions. And philosophy gets a bad rap because it's talked about, it's metaphysical, it's not real. But if it wasn't for philosophy, we wouldn't have the truths that we know based on experiments. So philosophers ask the deep questions, and they continue to ask those questions. So philosophy's actually guided us into having the science that we have, right? But when it comes to like experimenting, there's another type of person that's willing to, that's why I call them like void walkers, or lighting the void, right? It's willing to say, yeah, it's cool to talk about too, but I kind of want to try it, right? So some people will do psychedelics, some people will try to have an out of body experience, and then they'll go back and ask a bunch of questions. Well, what I think is happening is we are peering into realms, but it's also kind of like filtered through our human experience at the same time, right? Um, I'm not a scientific person. Like I love science, especially when it comes to things like geometry and sacred sexuality and stuff like that, right? But um, it's only because I like asking the questions. But again, to me, it goes back to understanding. Like we need to do our shadow work. I feel like the whole world is it's going through a mirror experience right now. We're all trying to figure out what's going on, and there's more uncertainty now than there ever has been. Right? Like I can't fathom how somebody would give themselves HIV practically because they want to feel safe. I can't fathom it, but it's their fear. Their fear is the whole reason why they're doing it. It's what's controlling them. It's the same. It's another system like religion, right? So the people that are willing to experiment and keep asking questions like you that say, no, I'm not going to put walls here. Not yet. Not yet. I don't have a definitive answer. That is what's evolving us, right? So I think that, yeah, I mean, I think we are experiencing a whole new world. I think we need to embrace this, as bad as it seems, as a journey, right? I really do. It really seems bad right now and uncertain, but this is the journey to see what's going to happen with the earth. And we still have a chance. You know, you got people out there like Jim Gill and that's doing stuff like coming up with solutions like food forest abundance. Hey, here's how to be more sovereign, right? Then you got people like Charlie writing books saying, hey, here's the hypocrisy that's going on a metaphysical level and on a government level, right? Wake up. So we're we're at this really pivotal stage in humanity right now. And I think what you're doing, and I think everybody should do a podcast. I know that sounds cliche too, but the more you express yourself, the more we're all gonna just kind of start figuring this out on our own, I think.
Well, I think there's tons of benefit in long form conversation. I know my listeners are probably sick of me repeating this over and over again, but I mean, just when I'm interviewed on other shows and people ask me questions, and especially if it's a question that I've never thought about or one I haven't thought about recently, so like my thoughts might have changed, I find myself like molding my answer while I'm giving the answer. Like, so I'm like, I'm not even quite sure. And I'm like, there's been times where I'm just like, I don't know. And I'm like, maybe it's this, maybe, and it's like, and so just verbalizing how I feel and what I think is helping me understand what I feel and what I think. And just because a lot of times I think we're so caught up, and I know I'm repeating myself, but we're so caught up in this just everyday grind of like, get to work, pay the bills, take care of your priorities. People don't really take a whole lot of time to sit down and talk and have a conversation. And, it's funny because Dr. Sanjay Gupta, that's something that he said after the Joe Rogan podcast. He's like, oh, I've never sat down for 3 hours. He's like, that's the longest conversation I've ever had. And it's like, wait, you've never like been around with your friends, like had an all-nighter where you're just bullshitting, debating things, busting balls, whatever you're doing, hanging out with your friends, and like next thing you know, it's hours late. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, either and that could probably be one of his problems, is maybe he hasn't had, if he had more of those 2-3 hour conversations, maybe be like, fuck man, like maybe I shouldn't be working at CNN and selling propaganda. Maybe I am full of shit, and the only way I can convince myself that I'm not is to stay so busy I don't think about it, which I think is super common, where people will just, that's where, I haven't really dibble dabbled it in psychedelics much. I mean, just a little bit. Like I've done edibles and stuff like that, but it's not something I do often. It's every once in a while when the kids are sleeping and somebody's giving us some, and the wife and I are like, why not? And we're up late and we're like, let's do it. And but I love anything, like if it's exercise, if it's yoga, if it's any spiritual practice, if it's a hobby like craft, any craft or painting or drawing or writing, it all will help tap into something like who you are and what you believe and what you feel, and make you reevaluate things. I really miss playing music live. I think the energy and stuff is always so much fun. And it was it was emotional getting like having people experience something that you emotionally put so much into. But I also really miss the writing aspect of it. And when I talk to musicians or when I talk to comedians or anybody who writes, we always talk about this, how it's therapy. Like you're writing and you're forced to have to think about things that maybe you wouldn't have thought about, or maybe relive a trauma or event, or really tap into how you really feel about something. And it's not something people that the average person does. And a lot of it's, I think it's the school system, and just we've created a society where it's all about like, hustling and grinding and making, as much money as possible. And we look down, I've said this on the show, where we live in a world where if my daughter, when she's eventually ready to date, if she had two boys that liked her, and one was an investment banker and one was a struggling musician that played at bars on weekends and just trying to get signed by a label or whatever,
Yeah.
Society would tell us, tell your daughter, leave that loser behind, go marry that investment
Right.
who comes from a wealthy
Yeah.
family. And that and it's like we've been kind of brainwashed to believe that's the direction we should go, and that's the right direction, even though the musician maybe doesn't have financial wealth but would love the shit out of my daughter and treat her correctly, and they would be much happier than the guy who probably has more ones and zeros in the bank but would neglect her because he's so focused on his career, or maybe isn't as moral as a person. So it's like, we just have to, that's why when we keep using this term like the new normal, like, and we're resisting it, because a lot of times we're resisting the way they want the new normal to be. But I don't think the old system was that good either. And like I've really thought about this a lot too, where just like, well, the old system was full of people who were depressed, self-medicated, over-medicated, people who didn't self-reflect, who weren't very nice to others and only cared about
Right.
themselves,
Yeah.
materialistic people. So I'm like,
Yeah.
the old normal wasn't that great either. I mean, the new normal definitely sucks way worse. But I think that there's nothing wrong with saying like, hey, you know what? Like maybe we do need to rethink society, but just in our image, and not in an image that benefits the elite and the corrupt.
I think we'll start realizing too eventually that these people that we think that are controlling us are simply just adapting to the pack, right? So all they're doing really is creating supply and demand so they can stay in power, right? So I saw like a commercial on, I was watching Pluto TV and a Facebook commercial comes up and they're talking about, well, let's talk astrology, let's talk crystals and all this other stuff and Facebook groups, right? And I'm like, oh hell, like it's gone mainstream now, right? But eventually you start to realize they're not the ones like creating the trends. We are. These guys that are all about the what you call the hustle and grind or the materialistic, I need more money, more power, whatever. All they're doing is observing what we're doing and countering. That's all they're doing. Right. So we're actually the ones that are like manifesting this whole thing based on what we do, based on the conversations we have, our actions, and what we tolerate. That's it. We have all of the power. And I think right now we just need to kind of like realize that we might have to play this zero sum game where, okay, we want them to do this. So we're going to have to like go this way so they'll adapt. But it does make you wonder though, do the people at the tops of all these things like Facebook, Google, Amazon, all these kind of people, do they have a soul? I wonder that sometimes. Are they like me and you? Because all we see is what it's like on TV. We get to hear a couple of conversations, maybe with Rogan if we're lucky, and that's it. But are they like us? What separates them from us? Whether it's bloodlines or whatever. And I think maybe the only thing that separates them from us is they simply just adapt to what we're doing. That's it. That's all it is. And this whole new plan, I think, for sustainable development that the UN's trying to do is an adaptation, but also it's like it's weird, right? It's like they're adapting to us, but they're also influencing us at the same time. But while that's happening, I think the beautiful thing is there's more podcasts coming out, there's more conversations happening, there's more people realizing their potential. And that's the war that's going on. And I think it's supposed to happen. I think we're in this one big alchemical bowl, right? And a lot of people are basing what they do off of fear. A lot of people don't have there's a lot of people, Ricky, that don't have the guts to do what you do. They can just turn on a microphone. They want to, but they want to have all these conversations, but they can't because they're afraid. So we're only limited by our fear, and like Sublime says, our arrogance. That's the only thing that limits us, I think.
Yeah, fear of failure, right? I mean, it's just like when going to a bar but back in the day, and there'd be some pretty girl and you didn't have the courage to go up to him, and then some dude goes up to him and she gives him the time of day. You're like, well, what the fuck? Like, why didn't I do it? I wish I got there first. And it's like between you and him, it probably wasn't looks or charm. It was just courage to give it a try. And I'm like you. I tell everybody to start a podcast. I'm a lot of people call me like the Joe Rogan of the alternative media community, because I'm just like, anytime I get an email or somebody writes me on social media, I'm like, yeah, start a podcast. If you're thinking about it, do it. I'm like, and if you need help, I'm like, I'll help you any way I can. I'll help you with just connecting with people. I'll help you with just, how to get started. And and a lot of them, like Truthzilla and Adam Gets Red Pilled, and some others that have come up, like they're ones that initially contacted myself and I'm sure others, and I would be like, yeah, do it, and help out, and help out in regards to just putting out productive conversation, because there could, in my opinion, like there can never be enough people having organic, real conversations. And the more of us there are, then hopefully it evens out, because there's plenty of people basically just spreading propaganda. So it's like, if there's more people fighting back against propaganda, regardless if they're hearing myself or you or whoever, like they might run into that small podcaster who maybe only has 50 shows or whoever. So you never know. You never know what type of ripple you're creating. One thing that was interesting when you're on the Unived Unwanted, that I think that was one of the few episodes I missed, but I listened to it. It was the episode 21 about the occult and symbolism. I didn't know you're a practicing occultist, and two, you've joined the Freemasons before. You've gone now. And so, speaking of like the elite and what they believe and how they think, because I find that super fascinating myself. Like I'm curious, like, are they really spiritual and they believe that there is a good versus evil, and that they're doing this for some greater good that they're delusional about? Or is it, I believe, like it's almost like they still believe in monarchies, they're just tricked us, and I was saying, no, we're in a democracy, but yet the elite are always going to be the elite, and there's always going to be people who think that they're the ones who should be making decisions for the population and for the majority, and the rest of us aren't intelligent enough or capable enough to make those decisions, so they're protecting everybody, or at least protecting themselves by controlling us. And but Freemasonry obviously has had a lot of influence on the world, and some people believe it's the elite, like secret knowledge that they're keeping from the rest of us, and or maybe they have other plans. I mean, what was your experience with all that?
My experience was I got into it because I was inspired by Manly P. Hall and all the guys, Massey, and all these books they wrote. I thought I was going to go into a society and learn the secrets of, ancient Egypt and all this other stuff. But really what I ended up learning is it's a community of people, that guys specifically, which this is kind of what broke me into magic, because I wasn't really looking for a fraternity, although it was cool. It was cool. But in where I was from, it's all mostly like old people, honestly. And what they do things in the community and stuff like that. They don't talk about it. They don't care about making the papers. In the Blue Lodge of Masonry, it's really all about learning the fundamentals of being a better person, being better for your community, your family, for God, but also being open to, there's more to this religion than meets the eye. And so what you start realizing is Masonry is an opening of building you up as a better person, but they do it through like Masonic tools and stuff like that, right? Like the ruler only has so much like inches on it, so you have to divide your energy a certain way, or being plumb and level and square. But you start to realize you're going through this morality thing, and a lot of this stuff you already know kind of deeply, and then you have these guys trying to hold you to it, and then they have meetings And then it's all about, well, who's going to be this guy or the master this or whatever. And you start to realize, man, this is just like a club, really, honestly. What Manly P. Hall intended it to be, or what he talked about when it comes to the Freemasons and stuff, that still exists, but not the way it did when he was around. It's not the same. So I got into the Golden Dawn and Rosicrucianism because it was co-ed, women could get involved, and there was no, they didn't hold anything back. Like they went straight for the mysteries. And then when it comes to magic, manifestation, and then I started realizing, okay, this whole Western system, Freemasonry, Kabbalah, Rosicrucianism, all this stuff, this is all based on the tree of life, the story of the Zohar, Kabbalah, and all the stuff. This is the Western mystery. That's all it is based on that tree. And that system itself came from Egypt. And it's a long, like, drawn out thing that you have to go through to realize that when you get to the end of it, you do learn, okay, there's these planets, there's these signs, there's these elements, there's things that we've marginalized in a parallel fashion. It's like not finding a specific truth about fire, but knowing fire is an element. And this is what it does in the earth. This is what it does metaphorically. This is what it does in the universe. And then you start kind of slowly but surely realizing, holy shit, like I am co-creating my reality with a creator. Like that's what it was for me, right? Like it's not I'm creating my reality. It's not God is doing this to me. It's like I'm working in unison with this thing, and we're conversating on a whole nother level, right? And we're creating this reality together. And there's an even deeper mystery to that when it comes to union, sacred sexuality. When you find, you know, the masculine and feminine in yourself, and then when you find that partner, you start to realize that love is the biggest creative force. But that's not really, like, I had to get out of Freemasonry to learn that. You know, like I had to walk away from it because it was limited to us. Dude, I was just a knowledge hungry freak, to be honest. And I don't like sitting back going, well, these guys are ruling the world, or there's something going on there. It's cool. It's exciting to talk about. Like there's this society that, no, I'd rather just go into it and find out myself, you know. And all they ask you is like, hey, do you come here on your own free will? Yes, I do. Do you believe in a creator? Doesn't matter what. Do you believe that this was created by something? Yes. And then they vote, and that's it, you know. But I never had any like crazy ritual experiences. The oaths are kind of crazy though. I got to tell you, you know, they talk about cutting your tongue out and all this other stuff if you reveal any like secrets or whatever. But then you find out that, well, there's nothing secret here that I can't read in a book other than handshakes or whatever, right? So there is a buddy system, honestly. Like you could go out, and if you're a Freemason, do a hail sign or whatever. And if a Mason is driving down the road, he's obligated to help you unless his family has an issue first, or it's like an emergency having to do with his family. Other than that, he's obligated to stop and help you. So it's kind of like their own set system that they created. I thought it was kind of cool, but they based it. You start to kind of realize too, they based this whole thing on this ancient Egyptian culture that they're trying to bring into America, you know, and that's really what it was all about. I think, you know, but I didn't go all the way up to like the 33rd degree and all this other stuff either. I know a lot of people. I have family members that are 32nd degree Scottish Freemasons, and I can tell you right now, they ain't ruling shit. You know, they're not. So it's not. It's just a cool fraternity. Are there like people in power that are involved with it? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What's your theory on that? Do you think they got involved the same reason you got involved, or do you think
no? When you start going through this, you'll start to see all these other offshoots. Like, what is this? Well, there's this other club for this, or there's the College of Freemasonic, whatever. And it's like, well, how many branches are there? Well, this one's invite only, and you're like, what? So when you go through Blue Lodge Masonry, you get to a choice. You can go the York Rite, which is 10 degrees, or you can go the Scottish Rite, which is 33, right? You can do both if you want to, but there's still a lot of other offshoots, and a lot of them are invite only. They have their own Rosicrucian branch too. and that's when you start to see kind of like the politics and the power stuff, right? And I think a lot of these, like from Arkansas, our Grand Lodge, they didn't allow Prince Hall Masons. In other words, the black side of Masonry, they didn't even, and this is another stupid thing they do. It's like a whole other government system inside the government. Like they don't allow it. They don't say that it's legit where other states do. And then other states will ban this state from being legitimate Masons. And it's like, what the hell are you guys doing? You're all, it's like this big, arrogant ego fight for power or something inside of the government, you know. And there always has been a kind of weird, like, war and soap opera going on in Freemasonry too that I wanted nothing to do with, man. I was all about knowledge. So I became inactive. I left it and got into, I just kept diving, man. I went into the occult and studied magic and mysticism and also astral travel, the out of body experience. It all runs together, you know.
Yeah, it's wild how when we look at the elite on TV and they seem like they have these suits and ties and I mean they don't seem like they're into the supernatural at all. And then you hear about them being Freemasons or them being the Bohemian Grove or Skull and Bones, like all these secret societies and all these groups, and it's like wait, they do believe in some deeper shit. And it's like, is it because they believe in some good versus evil type thing, or is it because they, almost like when Hitler was looking for UFOs or intrigued with the cult because he was looking for almost a supernatural way of controlling people? I mean, that's what it seemed like to me. Like he was just, there was no rock that he wouldn't turn over to try to find a way of getting the upper hand on everybody. And it's like, well, if that means supernatural, if that means exploring, looking for UFOs, whatever it may be. But a lot of great minds are also into or intrigued with the supernatural. I mean, you look at like Nikolai Tesla, and a lot of people said, "Oh, he was weird because he thought he was talking to people from other planets. He was sending out signals and all this stuff." And but there's also one thing before we get into that. I forgot one thing I wanted to mention was the Knights Templar. Like we're because they were like the religious faction of Masonry, right?
Oh, well, pretty much. They're the keeper of the secrets. Like this whole thing kind of spawned from the Knights Templar, and they still have a society of the Knights Templar, right? But I honestly, because I looked into that too, I honestly don't think that it's actually as connected to the original one. It could be, because when you go look at this stuff, they have lineages and everything, but this is just based on my research with this stuff. The Knights Templar felt like they had to guard, which was pretty much the reason why Freemasonry happened. Okay, like they felt like they had to guard these secrets because, I mean, look at it, dude. We came from crusaders. We came from people that will cut your head off if you don't believe in that book. Right? This book is law. If you don't do it, you're done. So they had to hide everything in symbols, but I think it was, it gets really deep, and if people that are Catholic, they're going to get pissed off at me because I don't have any problem with I love Catholicism too. I think it's great, right? And matter of fact, it's probably closer to the potential of religion on the Western side than anything, because they do ritual and they perform it and stuff. But the Catholics wanted power. The Templars found secrets that weren't in that book, and they guarded them. They took an oath to guard them. So people say, well, they spit on the cross and all this stuff. They did whatever, one, to save their families, and two, to guard these secrets, because they thought that in time we're going to evolve and learn this stuff ourselves anyways. If the Catholic Church were to get a hold of it, well, you know what they do? They put it in a vault and it disappears. That's what they're known for, right? The keeper of all this stuff. The Templars didn't want that. A lot of the original ones died for it, and I'm glad they did, right? But I honestly don't think Freemasonry today, there are some guys, especially like Northern Lodges and younger guys, that are doing it right. I feel like they are. But for the majority of it, it's not what it was really intended for. Now it's just a club. It's a club where you get to talk about cool stuff and learn the mysteries and shoot the stuff and then like do stuff for your community. But if you're interested in power within that club, you can do that too. But I really wasn't interested in that, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, because I know Pat Miletich is also a friend of the show and also a Freemason, and it's weird because it's like you said, like it could be that there are some groups within that group that are into something darker and deeper than maybe what meets the eye, but many people that I know that have joined Freemasonry, they've had a similar experience as you said. Like they're just like it's a bunch of guys who hang out. You kind of have a brotherhood. They look out for one another. You shoot the shit. You do these rituals or handshakes and stuff, which kind of creates this unity. And
Right.
and you do talk about some historical stuff that's interesting. But it's it's not to the level that like many people in probably our community, some people take it where they're controlling things or whatever. But I do believe
No.
that they're probably, I mean, you look at like Atlantis or you look at like, Graham Hancock's work in regards to, just people who have this idea that, or this theory that basically civilization has progressed, and then at some point there was a hiccup, there's something, and that made us have to start all over, or at least
Yeah.
steps backwards. And at some point throughout our history, there were civilizations that were more knowledgeable or more wise than we are. And yet, some of that could have been lost, or some of that could have been. I remember in reading this story years ago about how they found these pyramids near in Portugal, near the islands, the Azores Islands, and they were like below, way below sea level, and they're like, for those pyramids to be built and exist at sea level, like they must be, who knows how many thousand
Right.
year old.
Yeah.
And so we find all these evidence of like civilizations that are like, holy shit, like what who built this? What could have happened? Are you also like super intrigued with that and feel like maybe?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've just kind of learned like we're not going to know the answers to that without people like Robert Schoch and John Anthony West and people that are willing to go do the work and then stand up to mainstream society or education and tell us these things. But at the same time, I don't think we're going to get the legitimate answers without conscious exploration, right? I'm a big Robert Monroe fan. Like this guy was the ultimate void walker, right? And he was able to get out of his body and do things that most people are still trying to do today. And there's people that can do it, but you could go into past lives. It sounds nutty, man, but you could go into lots of different places once you enter the realm of consciousness. And see, Western society had built this system based on the tree of life. When you start to study the Kabbalah, they made these different levels and named them things. So Sephiroth, angels, this angel and this intelligence and this sigil rules this or that. And it's more agreement. Well, I don't think what we realized is what we were creating this roadmap of consciousness as we were exploring this together, right? Humanity's always looked for the answers outside of itself when I think we're creating it too. But I don't think, yeah, man, that's exactly, I got into Freemasonry because of that stuff. Because listening to the lectures of Manly P. Hall, like how could this guy be 23 years old, 24 years old and know the stuff that he does? Fact check the stuff he's talking about. It's real. Like, how could he do it without conscious exploration, without like deep penetration into his own self or his own mind? He did travel the world a little bit, but he knew so much stuff, man. It was crazy for his age. I mean, dude, like if you want to get all jacked up on caffeine and listen to Manly P. Hall lectures, you're going to learn a lot, right? You probably don't even need to go into Freemasonry if you're just there to learn. But yeah, I'm definitely fascinated by all that stuff. It still intrigues me to this day. Like the exogenesis thing Bruce Fenton talks about. I mean, it's to me, I don't think evolution is a viable explanation for this unless this planet is multi-billions of years old, and I just don't think it could be. I don't think it is, though. I really don't. I think we were created 100%.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, even when you look at what you were saying about how can somebody in his early 20s have all this wisdom and knowledge, it it kind of reminds me of Rupert Sheldrake a little bit. His theory on morph, whatever the hell it's called. I always get it wrong. But you know that famous theory that he has where they did this experiment where they had mice go through a maze,
Yeah.
and mice somewhere else that were never, connected to that maze, have never been in that room, have never.
Once one figured it out, the rest of them did. Yeah.
Exactly. And also like in a different place on, a completely different location, different mice. Like it's almost like we're all connected in some way, which actually
Yeah.
brought back together when I was talking to Dr. Tom Cowan last time he was on my show, and we're talking about water, right? And he's like, what is everything made out of? Water, right? Like everything, I mean, muscle, what, every plant, everything's made out of water, has water in it. And this idea that, I mean, you think about water, right? And water is constantly recycled on Earth. It evaporates, comes down, and it kind of goes through all of us, right? Because the water I drink will eventually come out, go get evaporated. Who knows where it's going to end up being? Maybe animal will drink it. Maybe it'll end up somewhere else. So it's almost like there is this weird connection between us because of water. And he believes that water has some sense of an intelligence. And it's really, I mean, the last time he was on the show, the previous time we didn't talk about this theory on water too much, but this last time when he talked about it, it kind of blew my mind a little bit, because I started thinking of Ruber Sheldrake. I started thinking about just, everybody throughout history that would talk about how we're all connected and we're all one. And it's like, well, it kind of makes sense. I mean, this kind of it seems like
Yeah.
one piece to the puzzle. And he talked about how he showed us these pictures and he screen shared, and how I forget who it was that did this experiment where they would talk to the water, and then they would freeze the water in the fridge, and then they would take the water out, within, I don't know, an hour or whatever, and they would zoom into the water, and the little crystals would make a image related to what they talked to the water about.
Based on the energy. Yeah. No, well, that's manifestation. That's what everything is, in a constant state of co-creation. And I think a lot of people look at like Nassim Haramain's work and people are fascinated by it. But this guy, to me, he wrote papers, that were peer reviewed, that he had all kinds of physicists just like throwing just crap at him. And other ones are like, whoa, this guy's really onto something, right? Like Nassim Haramain was showing, based on sacred geometry and the stuff that he knows, as above is so below, right? Like he was trying to show people this, and what you're talking about with intelligence in water. See, this is what I'm really fascinated with, taking science and the metaphysical travelers and bringing them together and see, like, look, they're talking about the same things, right? So in magic, they talk about the four elements: water, earth, air, fire. And water does have an intelligence, not only an intelligence, but it has elementals. And what I mean by elementals are like things that live inside that realm of consciousness of water, that have domain over it. And the only time people see even remotely close to this stuff is when they're not in the normal conscious state. Either they're taking DMT or they're getting out of body or whatever. They're like, oh, I saw this entity and I talked to it and it's all this stuff. But the magicians had little sigils that they used for each of them. It's like, well, where do these sigils come from? They just don't make them out of nowhere. These sigils were based on sacred geometry, and they could pick apart things through the cross in the 3D realm. If people studied the Golden Dawn, they'd find it fascinating, but then they throw it out completely. It's like, well, where did these guys get their origin story from? It don't make sense. So they throw the baby out with the bathwater because they had a conscious download, right? And they said, well, we need to teach this. Well, it's not credible. Well, why is it not credible? There's not enough science behind conscious exploration and metaphysics right now, in my opinion. There's not. We need more people like you and more people out there that are pushing the envelope, trying to find answers until we get there,
Well, think about, and again, this is actually kind of a weird example to use after talking about Tom Cowan, but when you think about the guy, I forget what the doctor's name or the surgeon's name is, that the first time he washed his hands before surgery and realized, like, oh, people aren't getting infections. because I washed my hands. And so it just like kind of spawned the germ theory idea. And people thought he was fucking crazy. And when you look at like every great discovery, and that's why it's funny, because I'm like using a germ theory example to defend Dr. Tom Cowan's theories that might seem a little out of the world. But it's true. Like any theory initially, when it breaks, it shatters the way you look at the things, or the way you've been told you look at things. People will initially think you're fucking crazy. And I think a lot of times, eventually, things that seem supernatural, science and the supernatural will eventually meet, because like you said, something that was unexplainable, maybe eventually the scientists will do a experiment that makes sense of it, or discover something that will make sense of something that they thought they were supernatural. But I mean, we've always done that. When you look at like, thunder, right? We didn't know what thunder was. We called it the god of thunder. There must be some god controlling it, before we so it's, so it always seems like, yeah, it's so even something that's supernatural, that seems unexplainable, doesn't mean that eventually we can't come to understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So like if an old Renaissance magician comes up with a sigil for an element of water, and he says, well, look, every time I do this invocation and draw this sigil, these things happen in my life, and metaphysically emotions correspond to water, and so does the astral realm. And so every time they do it, it happens, but they're also making it happen too, right? And then a scientist comes along and says, look, this water is doing this. Look at what it's doing geometrically, right? Like, look what it's doing, how it's recycling itself. There's definitely some kind of consciousness or an intelligence to it. These people need to keep talking to each other until somebody comes up with a realization of a new thing that we can definitely come to terms with, right? I mean, we don't have to nail down the tree. Sometimes we can say it's the forest. At least that's good enough to start with,
Yeah, it's so fascinating. That's why, like, there's no theory I would dismiss. Nothing, right? I mean, are you kind of like that? Like,
Yeah. Of course, like there's things that I like. Everybody has their lines. I believe everybody has their lines, right? Like things that Aleister Crowley was willing to do, I'm not so willing to do, right? Because I'm not completely reckless, right? And I'm not a freaking. This guy was sick in a lot of different ways, but we know some of the things that we know because of him. And if you look at all like not philosophers, what am I thinking? Prophets. Most prophets were assholes. The prophets in the Bible were assholes. This guy thought he was a prophet too. He thought he was going to bring down invoked, this thing in Egypt with his using sacred sexuality, right? To invoke this big Egyptian thing because he's going to bring on a new world of arrogance. I mean, it's stupid with some of the things that he did, but he also discovered a lot of things too. So I think a lot of this has to do with balance. I think everything's happening in its own time, the way it's supposed to happen, but I don't think we should stop asking questions, right? Like that's kind of why I started the Fringe FM. Like I just want people that are willing to like ask the questions, and I like radio and a little bit of mystery too, but I want people that are willing to ask questions. And I've even had like show hosts come and say, well, you got this one host that talks about this and I don't believe that. And I'm like, well, then you don't belong here, because we don't care about agreeing about everything, right? We're not trying to like control a narrative or paint a picture about you. We're just trying to like ask the questions. That's it.
That's why I'm so turned off by people who seem tribalistic. Like like anytime somebody seems like, when we did the Bitcoin episode, I had the same problem where I kind of felt like these guys want me to join their cult. Like we talk about any other cryptocurrency, and it's like, oh, those are all shit coins, and I'm like, whoa, like I was on your team until I realized like you're not letting me just be on your team. You're forcing me on your team. You want to make sure that I don't even. You want me to marry you and not look at any other women. Like it's wild. I have a huge issue with that. It's a huge turnoff. You
want me to marry you and not look at any other women. Yeah, I get that. Trust me, I get that.
Yeah. For other reasons.
Like, but it's what Charlie talks about, man. There is I think a spirit of hypocrisy, right? But people do things. I'm telling you, even then you have to come to an understanding why people do things. It's based on their fears, man. Like we got to get past this stage of fear, but also keep a balance, I think. And I think that's what we're doing. Like people like you and others, they're like, no, look, yeah, I have fears. I'm afraid of like my whole immune system shutting down and having to take booster shots for the rest of my life. Just like you have a fear that this vaccine is going to kill you. So let's talk about it, right? We don't have to join a tribe or a cult, but we need to hear each other out about this. And I've come to the conclusion, like, I'm not jabbing myself with anything. I don't trust a Windows update. They can't come out with a good update for like, months at a time. And these guys didn't test this stuff like that. It's ridiculous. This whole thing is ridiculous. And when people make all their decisions based on fear and uncertainty, it becomes toxic. And that's been proven like through, I would just not scientifically, but proven through conscious studies, through relationships, through everything. When you stay in this state of uncertainty and fear all the time, you're going to get nothing but negativity, nothing but negativity. It's like a gaping hole of negativity until somebody makes a decision. And that's what we're fighting for right now. This metaphysical war that's going on right now is it this decision we're making on who's going to take the power next? Is it going to be the people, right? Or is it going to be these systems,
Which is why I think you see a lot of people who are anti the vaccine or anti what's going on in the world right now. They're religious people, Dr. Scott Jensen, Dr. Carrie Madej, a lot of these doctors I've had on, I think even Dr. Peter McCullough, like quite a few of them are religious. They're not atheist doctors. They're religious doctors, and
Yeah.
I think it's easier for them to kind of understand that there could be evil people in the world. And I've said this on the show quite a few times. I think that to the average person who might be not spiritual or might not be religious, they have a hard time believing that anybody would purposely harm so many people or would purposely let so many people get harmed. And I think religious people, maybe that's an easier pill to swallow, right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, because you want to believe the best of everybody. You do. You want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and think that everybody cares the way you care. But have you ever held $1 billion in your hand? I mean, before you even point your finger at somebody else and say that's an evil person, we need to understand the metaphysical principle of power and money and what it does to people, just people in general, right? Like most of the people that win the lottery that have been poor all their life, they go fucking crazy. They don't do anything right. So these other people that they think they're maintaining balance as they keep increasing their power, then they think they're like heroes. They actually stand up in front of a crowd and say, we need to cut out 20-30% of our population because the world's getting overpopulated. And I've got answers and we need to come up with this new vaccine. They really think they're heroes. The truth is they don't give a shit about your sovereignty. They think they're there to save the day because they have grand ideas of themselves, which is a megalomania thing that happens in humans once they get power and all the shit. And it's not even about the person. It's about that metaphysical fundamental. Like we could talk about it philosophically forever. What happens to people when they get power? Who can handle it and who can't, and all this other stuff. And it's a long form discussion, but to try to force me to trust it, that's not happening. I don't trust it.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with the Stanford prison experiment, and are you familiar with it by any chance? The Stanford prison experiment.
Is that the one where they were like hitting them with the electricity every time they said the wrong answer, or is that a different one? I get them all confused.
Yeah, me too. I haven't talked about them in a long time, but that's a really good one too, and actually one that I forgot. That's a really good example of one too, where they basically, for people who aren't familiar with it, the one that I think you're referring to was when they had these people a part of this experiment, and they had somebody like behind a wall or behind something, and they're asking them questions, and they were told every time that the person behind the wall or whatever it was that they were behind something incorrectly, you would shock them, and then every time they get it wrong, you would increase the voltage, and they kept increasing it, and it was, and the person on the other side that was getting shocked was actually a actor, and they were basically studying, like, even when you think you're harming somebody because you think a authority is telling you to do something, would you still do it? And come to find out, like, some people, I remember watching one person, like, questioning, like, hey, are we going to kill this guy? Like, or it's like just continued playing the
Yeah.
game, just so that's a really interesting one. The one that I was referring to, the Stanford prison experiment, and there's actually a good uh, it's a film called I believe it's called The Experiment, with who's that famous actor, Brody something. But it was about, they basically got people to be a part of this prison experiment. So they picked people to be prisoners and people to be officers, and they're like, basically these are average people who had no history of violence, nothing crazy about them, no meds or nothing. And they're like, they just put them in a prison, a made up prison, and said, hey, like, you guys are going to be the officers, you guys are going to be the prisoners. And then I believe they created some rules just to make it interesting, to kind of spark some things. And they're like, hey, if the prisoners don't eat all their food, you guys decide what the punishment is. And little by little, like, the punishments were getting worse and worse.
Yep. Power took over. Yeah.
And the power got to their head. And some of the people that were the least violent, and you would think would be the least violent, people who lived at home with their parents or whatever it may be, they were the ones who were taking it over the top, and like, taking off their clothes and like hosing them down naked and like all this crazy stuff. So there's examples and examples of that. And who knows what type of trauma or what leads somebody to not handle power well. But you see it even with police officers. Like, a couple of my really good friends are police officers, and we talk about this from time to time, how like back in the day, a lot of police officers were like jocks, or tough guys. They're like Irish or Italians, who are kind of like tough guys. They're pretty confident, and whatnot. So once they get a badge and they have a gun, their ego doesn't blow up that much, because they already kind of have a blown up ego already a little bit.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And you get now, a lot of the people who are becoming officers are kind of bookworms and book smart guys who never had this feeling of like, you walk into a room and you kind of feel like the alpha male, and that power goes to their head because now they're a police officer. Like, now everywhere they go, people are talking to them a little differently and a little bit more polite to them, and they have a hard time handling that extra authority and power they have over others. So I think it's a real issue. I think a lot of, I mean, you see it even, a more typical example. How many people have talked to another employee about like, oh, that boss is such a shithead, or that supervisor manager is such a shithead. Then your friend gets promoted and he turns into that shithead, because it's like, now they have that authority and they're doing the same thing that the other person did. So I think not everybody can handle that.
Right. And this is and what you're talking about is dead on. Like, this is why I got so interested in metaphysics and the occult, because there's an old Bible verse that talks about we don't fight against flesh. In other words, the war isn't between me or you or Bill Gates. It's not. It's against principalities and powers, metaphysical things that actually exist that are unseen, right? And so when we start to understand what has power over me and what do I have power over, right? We start playing this game with ourselves. We start to really understand who we are as humans and what we have capable of, right? Like, to say, it's one thing to say that I can put together a ritual and manifest something into my life based on the energetic work that I'm doing. That's what ritual magic is. It's another thing to say, well, I'm going to take a jump off a bridge and fly because I'm God, right? Like, we have to, I think we have to do what's being forced to us right now is understanding what we're about. It's like this whole interverse thing, right? People want to fight about flat earth and what's out there in space, and let them do it. I think there's something bigger on the inside.
Well, this it reminds me of that quote, if you change the way you look at things, what you look at changes, right? Like, it's all internal, like it's all in your head. A stressful situation is only stressful because you're looking at it as a stressful situation. You can completely flip it and say, let's use this as a mental exercise. I remember when my son was born, because he was my firstborn, and and he wasn't a good sleeper at all. He would only sleep like 2 to 3 hours at a time. So you're like completely sleep deprived and delusional most of the time. And I remember being like frustrated, and I'm just like, listen, like, I'm not going to look at this situation as I have a baby who won't sleep. I'm looking at it as like this is a challenge to see how long I can go without sleep, and if I can keep my cool and not, and not stress in a stressful
Yeah.
situation. And that's kind of what kept me going, was like, okay, I'm like, there's no way I won't outlast a newborn. I'm like, I'm an adult. I'm like, this baby's gonna have to,
Yeah, right. You start to learn where your lines are, though, eventually, right? You're like, okay, this is another thing, too. Like, I need help. I need connection. I need community. Like, there's a whole other thing that we're being taught right now. It's like, no, you don't need that. You want that. No, I need water. I need food, right? I need shelter. But we need love, too, right? Like, that's a part of it. That's what the whole movie, The Fifth Element's about, the five-pointed star. It's an essential. And I think we've lost that. We have to come back to it, like compassion, empathy, and love, right? It's not easy to do, like for people like Bill Gates, a lot easier to do for your baby. But I think this whole podcasting thing is going to show us this too. I think this all of what we're doing now is going to show us this too. That this is an essential. It's another element that we essentially need in our life.
Well, that experiment where, not to keep referring to experiments, but I think they're fascinating and they tell us a little bit about human nature. But this experiment where they starved I believe it was a monkey, and they starved it, and it was they took it away from its mother for the first time in its life, starved it. Then they put like two cages, one that had a stuffed animal that looked like its mother, and one that had food, and they wanted to see where would it go, what was more important for its survival. And it went to the mother because comfort and love was more important than food. And this goes to what you're saying, like this whole Maslow's hierarchies of needs and all this stuff. Like, no,
Yeah.
food's not our first necessity. Like, you can have all the food in world. I mean, perfect example. How many fucking rich kids are depressed? And so, I mean, they have all the food and all the necessities they need, and they're super depressed and lost in the world. So, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating, and then I hope that we keep going down this journey too. And like, I'm not afraid to get to do a little magic and do some out of body stuff to figure it out. I think we need to be more brave as humans on a metaphysical level, not just on a physical level. We need to be able to do both. And when it comes to like the inner work of who we are. And I think by doing that, it will allow you to go and be and become things that you never thought you could be, right? Somebody might stand up to a school board because they saw you doing what you did, because somewhere along in your life, you did the inner work to realize, hey, I got to stand up for people that can't stand up for themselves. There's more out there than just my problems, right? And we're still in a world where people are really only focused on their own stuff. That's what we got to get out of, I think.
Yeah, I mean, a community. I think that's why, like, my father makes wine, and you talk to Polish people who make alcohol, or Italians who make wine, and like all these traditions that have stayed with us throughout all these years. The one, churches, all these things. I mean, they all have something in common. They all bring the community together. They put you around. It gives you a reason to get around people that you love and friends and spending time together. And I remember growing up, when my dad would make wine, like, he'd have friends and family over, everybody's helping, everybody's eating and drinking. And it becomes like just a celebration or a fun event. And I think that's why you're starting to see younger and younger people, or even malls. Malls are now remarketing towards people who want to do activities. You see more arcades, you see more mazes, and what, knife throwing and all these weird things. It's like, what do they all have in common? It's like we're looking for connection. We're looking for a reason or a way to connect with one another and be together. And I think for a long time, and this goes back to, I guess, our initial point about the old normal and the new normal, that was a big part of the old normal, was like community wasn't even in the conversation. Like, the most important things were your career, working hard, picking up every overtime you can. I mean, we look at even the country that I was born in, Portugal. A lot of Portuguese Americans here look at my Portuguese ancestors and family members in Portugal, and they're like, oh, they're lazy. They don't want to work on weekends. They just want these easy jobs. They don't want, it's like, maybe, or they figured out you can always make more money, you can't make more time, and
Exactly.
they'd rather spend more time with their friends and family and doing the things that they enjoy doing, and balance that out with the things that they have to do. I always say, like, balance out the things you have to do and the things you want to do. And there's no reason why you should completely, be one-sided, only do the things that you have to do, and completely dismiss the things that you want to do. And yeah, are there sacrifices? Absolutely. Like, are you going to make a little less money? Are you going to have a little less material wealth, and maybe not as new of a car, but you'll spend more time with your friends and your family and doing the hobbies you enjoy, and that's priceless. You can't put a price on that. So it's I think we have it all backwards.
Yeah, we do. And with that question that you asked about Freemasonry, magic, and all that stuff, really, when you get into all that, that's really what you're learning. It isn't just manifesting. It's like, hey, I have this energy, you know, balancing out my energy is of the utmost importance, but also balancing out my connections in my life and my time, and bringing that. The more balance you have in your life, the more powerful your energy is. And that comes with connection. It also comes with yourself. And it's really just learning about energy, right? And it's cool to watch other people explain it, whether they're magicians, scientists, Nassim Haramein. You start to see it all kind of like come together.
Awesome. So for people listening who, because I know we got into so many other topics that we didn't even talk about Fringe FM too much, but for you can listen to Ripple Effect podcast, and many of our mutual friends like Grimerica and Charlie Robinson also on Fringe.fm. Can you give people just a rough idea what is Fringe FM? Where can they get it? Where can they listen to it? And also plug your own show, which is also on Fringe FM.
Yeah, Fringe FM is just it's a digital radio station that I created along with the community for a more live, interactive radio type feel. It turned into something bigger than I thought it was going to be, and it's still grassroots and growing, right? But it's Fringe.fm. That's the website. And you can download the Fringe FM app, and the more you get involved as a community, the better. We're still trying to make it look all pretty and stuff, but it's fun, right? And then my show's Lighting the Void. I'm an old Art Bell fan, so I do a show late nights, 9 p.m. Pacific, Monday through Friday, and it's live on screen calls. And I'm just an old radio guy, so I love doing that stuff.
Awesome. Definitely check out. The cool thing about it is if I'm like driving and I'm like, oh, I don't have anything specific to listen to, I'll just throw it on and be like, what's on Fringe.fm? Let's just see who's talking, what's on. And I know you have the whole schedule on your website, which I love your website. You have I don't know who does your web design, but it's a really cool website. I really like it. And you can see all the shows that are on there, when they're on, all that stuff. You can listen to it like Joe said, you can listen to it right on a desktop or even any mobile phone or whatever by a web browser and go into the website fringe.fm. But the app is really cool too. It plays in the background. So, and it basically it's live radio for alternative media, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, Amanda, she did the website. Amanda, she did the from alternate perspectives. She did the website because she likes to like take people's ideas and brands and like turn it into an image. And so I just let her go crazy on that thing, and it turned out to be pretty cool. And we're still tweaking it too. That's the fun part about this thing, is like we're still tweaking this stuff as we go.
Yeah, it's never ending. You're just constantly, and that's the cool thing about doing these type of projects, is that you get to constantly exercise that creative part of your brain. It's not a repetitive motion, a mindless job, which I think is probably another contributing factor to why a lot of people are unhappy and whatnot, because they're stuck in those mindless jobs where where something like this is, you're constantly coming up with new ideas and collaborating and stuff. So it's awesome. So everybody, please check out Joe's show, his website, his app. You can download it. I believe it's available. I have an Android. I know I have it on Android, but
Google Android and Alexa. Yeah,
awesome.
Android, Apple, and Alexa. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Joe, for the conversation. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll get you on a Union of the Unwanted very soon, and we'll get up there too. And keep up the great work. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, brother. It was fun.
Thanks,
Take
Joe.
care.